Hours with. I am Ryan Miller, and as always, with me, Scott Elchison. Scott, hello.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed. And our special guest this week is Alice Pott from Speakable. Alice, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the invite. I feel honored.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here. This is our always something that we're looking forward to at the end of the week. So this made it extra special to have an old colleague on the show as well.
Yes.
So how we like to kick these things off, we always like to lead in with a softball type question. So why don't you just give us the lowdown on what Speakable is? Who are you? What do you do?
Okay, great. Well, Speakable is a company started by Jordan Houston. She comes from a hugely activist family, and if anyone hasn't heard of her, Google her. She is a fascinating and very inspiring woman. But she has made it her mission to try and make social action and social impact as easy as possible for people so that people can take action on the issues that they really care about when they want to, in those moments of inspiration when we feel compelled to act. And I think I left working with Ryan to come here because I was very much feeling overwhelmed by all of the issues that are facing us every day. I think this year especially has highlighted the fact that we are more aware really of the issues in the world than ever. Like, we're being shown videos that are horrifying about police violence. We're reading articles all the time that are making us feel things. And I think that if you don't have ways to act on those feelings and being aware of those issues, it can very much lead to feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling overwhelmed, feeling powerless. So Jordan is setting out, and Speakable is setting out to try and be able to let people take positive action in those kind of collective moments when we want to try and impact change, like the one that we're going through at the moment. And just to give you some more background, she was actually reading an article about the Malala shooting when she came up with the idea, and she will often describe that she was feeling all of the feelings when she was reading that article and wanted to be able to learn more and do more towards the girls of Pakistan who were fighting for their educational rights and getting shot for standing up for that. But she kind of got distracted by everyday life, like we always do, like the next email, the next text, and really felt like she'd missed that moment when she was feeling like she wanted to do something towards that. So she's trying to make sure that we don't miss any more of those moments, that people are able to take those positive actions and be able to add up to that collective change.
That's fantastic.
It's big ambitions, and it's a great company to work for right now. We all feel so proud to be working for Speakable with everything that 2020 is throwing at everyone.
Absolutely. And so I guess we want to get right into, so how does that work? What is the Speakable platform? What is the product that the team has developed in order to make these actions a reality?
So Action Button is the handily termed first product, and that is it's a great name
for the product.
It is, and it has Take Action written all over it. It is essentially using technology to try and make it easy so that when you're feeling inspired to act, like, you can be tied up to actions that make sense towards the issue that you're reading about, or some kind of action that you're going to want to take in that moment. So because Jordan was reading an article when she first came up with the idea, and because content is often what's making us feel and think, Action Button's very much designed to live within content. So if you take an example of what we're living through at the moment, if you are reading an article about what happened to George Floyd, or you're reading an article about racial injustice, we can place an action button right within that article that can give you a way to act on it and to make your voice heard, to say how you feel on that issue. We have things we call sentiment polls, say whether you think you're being treated fairly, whether you want to learn more. You can take a quiz in that moment. You can also take really meaningful actions in that moment. So we can tie you up to local reps and say, so you can email the people that are representing you to make your voice heard. We can pre-populate those emails that are related to legislation that's coming up that is going to be able to help towards that issue. We can get you registered to vote to make sure that you're getting the right people in to address the next election. And we can get you signed up to local volunteering opportunities. You can donate towards organizations that are helping. All of the actions are being served to you that are related to what you're reading about, and that's being made as easy as possible. So We're tying you up to those local opportunities. We're tying you up to like your local rep, and you don't have to click away from the page at all. You can do all of that within that moment. Because I think, like we were all talking earlier about people possibly being distracted by everyday life, like you just need to make it easy. And I think once people have done that, they've taken that positive action, they're left with that good feeling of like, I've felt something about this issue, I've been able to act on it. So Action Button, when we first started, we were all about building our publisher network, getting to as much content as possible and as many of those moments as possible that people want to act on. And then in the last couple of years, we've been getting brands to sponsor those actions. So brands that are acting with purpose, brands that are trying to help towards these big issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's social justice, whether it's coronavirus, like what's been hitting us this year, that we're making action buttons that are related to what they're doing towards that issue, and they're really inviting people to join them in making an impact.
Mm-hmm. And so I'd be curious to hear how, I guess you are working with brands. Like when you are talking to them, are they looking to do something that, like you said, like that is sponsoring in that unit? Like, do they come to you with a cause they already support and say, hey, we're looking for new ways to put this messaging out there and have people engage with it? Like, what are like the different avenues of challenges in which brands are coming to you and looking for, your solution to help solve one of their problems?
That's a really good question, and it can definitely vary. We definitely have the brands that have already got programs in place. For example, they're already trying to fix something. Shout out to the Quicken Loans team, actually, because Rocket Mortgages was the first campaign we did with a UN brand. They have things set up to try and help towards veteran homelessness. And we did a campaign with them towards like the holidays last year, where we were trying to like make awareness of like that issue and of what Rocket Mortgages was doing towards that issue. So sometimes clients will have programs already set up. I think sometimes clients are very much like reacting quicker and quicker these days as this becomes the year of social impact. They're making donations to organizations. They'll maybe want to bring that message into an action button, so they'll have that messaging already. And we'll be able to say, right, you can also help towards donating towards this cause, or you can volunteer towards this issue, but like this brand is like helping you to be able to join them in taking action towards that. I think other clients we are talking to like are not that far down the line yet, but we do have ways within Action Button that we're automatically finding like organizations that are helping towards that issue, for example. So if a client did want to try and sponsor donation actions towards something, it will be able to identify, say, it's coronavirus and vulnerable communities, like all of the organizations that are helping the hungry during this crisis, that are helping local communities, and people can pick which one they want to donate to. So they don't have to go through all of that hassle really of being able to like find an organization that they want to support. We're going to be able to use the technology to identify it for them. It's obviously easier if we have a brand like who is already making a stand, a brave brand, like we like to call them brave brands, that do want to use the technology to the best of its ability. So like imagine like a Unilever brand, for example, they're constantly like fighting for advocacy campaigns. At the moment, they're doing something around paternity leave. They did something around the Crown Act and trying to be able to make sure that people aren't discriminated because of the hairstyles they're wearing to work, which might be due to their culture or their race. And so they are very much like about emailing Congress and being able to power those actions towards that. We love it when a brand is doing something like that, because then you're really using the technology to the best of its capabilities and you're giving people something that's really meaningful. And even if they don't complete that action, they're going to have that good feeling that they were given that option.
Yeah, so you talked about brave brands and how it's really easy to partner with them, but I think a lot of brands are feeling incredibly overwhelmed at the moment in trying to coordinate a response to all the actions that are, happening around the world. So let's say I'm more of a Cowardly Lion type brand and I need a little bit of help navigating the space. Like, how does Speakable work with these brands to help identify an authentic way to come to the market?
So we very much have the experience from having Action Button out there, and I should say, because we've had Action Button going out across our publisher network, we know how people are responding to these issues. We kind of know what people are going to engage with more, the kind of messages that they're going to engage with. I think as with anything in the purpose space, it does need to feel very authentic to that brand. But I think the cowardly brands, I feel like there's going to be less and less of them by the end of this year. I think everyone is being forced to be brave as people and as brands, as a planet this year, and face a lot of things that might have made them feel uncomfortable in the past. And I think like we're making progress all the time. I feel like if you'd thought a few years ago about the amount of brands that have stood up on the racial justice issue and like made statements or posted things on social media, like that is like a huge step in terms of like big and small brands being brave and taking on that issue. But then everyone is expecting more. Everyone's like, that's not enough. Like we want to see what you're doing to act. We want to be able to help you in taking that action. We don't want to feel powerless either. And brands really like are so powerful. They have employees, they have such a big footprint, they have so many communications touch points. I think we would basically talk them through the need for it using the research to back it up, and then like related to their category, related to the actions that they want to drive, like we would give them insights into how people have responded to that across our network. And we have a dedicated editorial and content team who will be constantly advising in terms of what kind of message is going to resonate well, what kind of actions are going to be helping to meet that ultimate goal. And we love the brands that are like, we want to drive this many actions, we have this very clear direction, so that we can be like, right, we're going to help you achieve that. We're going to create action buttons that are very customized towards being able to meet that goal.
Yeah. And this might change going forward. Like when you are talking to brands, like, is there any reservation on like what, like where the budget comes from? Because we know sometimes there are brands and companies that do have money set aside for these sorts of campaigns that may be outside of this like the standard general media budget. So when you're talking to brands from your experience, are you starting to see like a shift in that where maybe advertisers are starting to actually vote with their dollars and where and what they support by putting advertising on those platforms and in those different ways, or is it still maybe coming from budgets that are allocated specifically for social good, racial justice, like these types of campaigns that are out there that maybe might be deemed outside of the traditional marketing budget that the teams and brands have?
That's a great question. I think it's definitely. I've been with Speakable for a year. And I think like even across the first few months of that year and then very definitely accelerated into this year, like it was definitely changing. Like, as you say, like a lot of brands that we were talking to were just like, oh, you should speak to the CSR team, like, which would like when they have no budget to support it, they were just like, this is very much just hidden away on our website, but like we're kind of committing the money to these projects, but we don't have budget to put behind that. We were also talking to all of the media teams, like the teams and the initiative teams, and we were seeing that trend of there being more and more media budgets towards these kind of campaigns. And I think brands are definitely recognizing that you will have a better relationship with the people you're talking to if you're going to give them that positive experience and that way of joining the community with them to be able to take action and using your media space really and your media spend to be able to do something positive around it rather than just like telling people about what you're doing. So complete tangent, but I always like to bring up these.
Oh yeah, where you go? Like we're on board.
Did you see the YouTube video of all of the coronavirus ads like that came out maybe like 2 weeks after everyone went into lockdown, and it was like slow piano music and like it was all like the same words, like just like, oh, we're all in this together but from a distance. I feel like that that was like
it's very better. It's actually something that our on this week's episode of the podcast, Chad was talking about with our guest Michael Casson about it's like this like a Mad Lib in a sense. It's all the same thing. You kind of insert cause or brand name and it's all exactly the same, which kind of lessens the effect of what I think people are trying to get across. It's people want to be the second place. They're very okay with being second place and following somebody else, which hopefully is changing. I think that is something that's going to be changing where especially on causes like this, brands and teams are able to go out there and be like the first and stand by what they have to say versus just kind of doing that cookie cutter Mad Lib fill-in a sense.
Exactly, just like we have this advertising space, we've decided to fill it with like some slow, sensitive piano music and some of the ad libs. And I feel like there was quite a reaction to that, and there was a lot of research that for people to be saying, we don't think you should really be advertising unless like you're doing something to address the situation, or you're like giving us a way to help the situation. So I think that kind of like accelerated that trend for that to be a public expectation. And I think brands are recognizing that, and I think a lot more of their media investment, hopefully, is going to be going towards being able to do that and being able to like power action around some of these issues. And even if they haven't made a stand on something yet, like now is the time to do it, and to be able to to be able to channel that emotion into action.
Yeah, and I think words are becoming increasingly hollow, and to your point, like powering action is how you actually differentiate yourself from the pack. And I know you kind of rifled through them as you were kind of sharing anecdotally about what the action buttons are, but how exactly are you driving users to engage with these causes that the brands are kind of championing on these publisher sites?
So what will happen is, like, let's just like imagine that we're working on a brand campaign together, and actually has loads of great purposeful brands. Like Levi's springs to mind. They do a lot of great stuff around voter mobilization, around closing their stores, trying to make sure that their employees can get out to vote, putting it on their merchandise, for example. Like we would work with your team on a brief like you normally would. We'll be like, what messages do you want to get across? What actions do you want to drive? We have a suite of actions that people can pick from. So we will put together like an action button journey, which is basically putting together the creative for that campaign. And we'll have all these options in terms of whether it's a sentiment poll to say how you feel, whether it's like a quiz to educate you, whether it's emailing Congress, whether it's signing a petition, volunteering, etc. Like what action do we want to drive? In the case of Levi's, like it would be very much geared towards registrations to vote, hugely important, and we are very much like focused on trying to get as many brands doing that as possible at the moment as we go into the next election. We'll then decide like what kind of content is going to be driving action across our network. So like it could be political content, it could be content around all of the social impact areas that have been going out, that have been raised to our attention this year. So it could be about racial justice, like you want to be able to register to vote, go like do that from this article. Will be identified every time an article is published across our network of publishers that's related to that campaign that we think people are going to want to act on. And we'll be placing action buttons into that article. So it's very much contextually related. If it's about climate change, for example, we'll be creating action buttons related to climate change and steps you can take. And then we'll be placing those action buttons within like sustainability, climate change articles. And we're being alerted and placing them in there. And then everything we're doing is geared towards engagement. So we're very much like trying to authentically bring people into that action button journey, and then tailor that journey according to what their situation is, especially in this year when everyone is in totally different situations. Some people might have lost their jobs, they don't want to donate. Some people are very much being affected by the racial justice issue more than others. So we will gear it towards engagement, like we'll be drawing people into that engagement funnel, and then we can provide conditional journeys based on how people have answered. We can set up tracking within action buttons so that you can retarget people according to how they feel or what their education or awareness level is. And we can also like tie into your bigger picture in terms of like if you've interacted with action button in some way, how is it affecting how people are interacting with all of your communications elsewhere? Like how are we adding up to the bigger goal?
Absolutely. So you keep talking about this publisher network. So can we hear about that? Like, who are the people in it? Like, what is the scale behind that? Because one of the questions everybody likes to ask is, in general, when we talk to a partner, what is the scale? What is the reach that we're able to get through working, with Speakable?
So, great question. And yes, I do keep banging on about the publisher network. So, Jordan and Drew came from the publishing world. Drew is our CEO, so he came from Condé Nast, and they very much put a good network in place for us of all the kind of brand safe premium publishers, like the Condé Nast of this world, MSN, Time, for example, Refinery 29, publishers that will have a lot of different titles so that we can get to a lot of different content, around all kinds of different issue areas. And we're building that all the time. So we have a dedicated team that is going out and making new partnerships with publishers as we go, and we can also make them on behalf of clients as well if the client has a specific partner that they want to work with, or they're doing a branded content piece, for example. So we're building that publisher network, and like we are placing the action buttons into those articles, and the scale really is dependent on what the issue is we're trying to address, and like the amount of content we think is going to be out there. But we have been able to run a campaign in a month before we got to 10 million viewed action buttons. We charge on viewed action buttons, I should say. So once you've gotten to the article and you've gotten to the action button. So 10 million impressions in a month. And we're talking to a lot of brands and hoping to work with a lot of brands this year that have really big ambitions and that will be trying to drive like that many, if not more, impressions so that they can get to a really good amount of actions at the end of it to be able to drive actions in this all-important year. So the scale really is there, and I like to think that it's like a good bridge between having the scale but also having the relevancy and like the contextual moments because of the way that we're placing action buttons into these articles. So it kind of like is a mix of being able to get that big awareness piece out there, but also making it feel very personal to people.
Right. Yeah, that's exciting. Ryan, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was going to chime in, and you were talking about, cost per view model. Obviously, another important question that our media teams always ask is, how do you get involved? What is entry level kind of bottom barrel fees for working with Speakable? And then what does something more robust look like?
So bottom level, entry level fees, and yes, we charge on the viewable CPM. We usually suggest going no lower than really 50K. To be able to get to a reasonable amount of insight from that and a reasonable amount of engagements for us to be able to really tell if it's worked properly. We can be working with budgets of like $1 million plus, depending on like the scale and the ambition. And we can very much, when we're working on a brief, we can either work back from like what actions do you want to drive, like what are the ambitions there, or like what budget is available, and we'll be estimating like how many impressions you're going to get. We'll be able to estimate how many engagements you're going to get based on the actions that we're driving. And within that cost, or any campaign across our network, we're including things like creative production, different levels with different scales, and like there's scaling like efficiencies of cost as you go up. But we're also including all of that like data and insight in terms of like how people are interacting with Action Button. So we're able to be very reactive as we go.
Got it. And let's go one level deeper here on those analytics and insights. So what can we as marketers get back? So obviously we're buying on a cost per view or a cost per engagement. And what else can we understand about who interacts with those action buttons?
Yeah, so you are buying on that view. So I've seen the action button, and then everything we have really detailed levels of reporting and analytics. Because I came from like the media world, I actually worked at in London, so very much into like the research and analytics and was like working on all these studies. I kind of like to think of us as a ready-made research study, which is particularly helpful for the non-courageous, perhaps cowardly, as Ryan put it, brand, who are trying to dip their toe in to this area and trying to see how people are reacting to it. So we capture every engagement. Like we'll be able to tell you like what engagement rates are as per usual, but also like how people are answering, whether they feel one way or another, like whether they feel like they're in this community or that community, like what their education levels are. So we'll be like giving you all those insights, kind of a little bit like a research study, as well as and that's all like first party data. When someone completes an action that's like an email action, so say it's email Congress, sign this petition, sign up to volunteering, they're also opting in to hear more about that campaign and more about that issue. So you're basically building a community and a database of people who care. So we are sharing those email addresses as well with the brand, like so that they can feel like they're getting to those valuable people for them, and that they are building that kind of community feeling. That's all first party. And then the third party, from a third party perspective, we are trying to tie more and more into like the very intricate tracking with your teams to get as much information as possible. So including like retargeting pixels according to how people have answered, attribution pixels to see where we fit into the bigger picture, as well as like any kind of tracking in terms of like impressions and stuff like that. So it is very detailed, and we do it as we go through the campaign. So we will do every couple of weeks, and then we'll also like alert people if we think we should be making like a creative optimization or a tweak to messaging, or we think a different kind of action would be working better towards that end goal. We'll also be like saying like what kinds of content are working better and things like that. So it is a very, very detailed, for someone with an analytical mind like me, it's exciting for a number geek.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned newsletters for a second, and obviously that was something like if you wanted the action to be somebody to email Congress or, you know, a politician, senator, whoever it might be. And we talked about the content network being, you know, publishers, but is it just limited to like your traditional publishers, like, you know, like for example, like you said, Condé, BuzzFeed, Time Inc., or can it also live across social media platforms? Can it live in email newsletters and like email marketing? Can like videos? Is there ways to work inside of video? I'm just curious to know that, like, are those other platforms also included in that larger, you know, publisher network in places where this action button can live?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to clarify, when I'm like mentioning emails, like it's like an email Congress, like within action button kind of action, which is like basically like saying like a pre-populated email, let's say, about a piece of legislation coming up, and you've sent that email off to Congress. Newsletters is very much like another channel that we are developing new products towards. But yes, at the moment, Action Button can live in a lot of these places. And we will, when we're doing a campaign with someone, often try and give it to the client to be able to use in as many of those different touch points as possible. So our end goal is always driving as much action as we can. From social, it's like most seamless on Instagram. So you can swipe up to act from Instagram. There's varying degrees of functionality because of restrictions that various platforms have. But like Facebook and Twitter, for example, like you can act, but it will take you to action button within a piece of content. So we'll usually recommend that a brand like has a page or something on their site that says what they're doing about it, and then someone can take action from within there. Same with newsletters. You can put action button within a newsletter. And actually, exciting times. I'm talking to some of the teams about an offer we're making for our agency partners at the moment, which is to be able to use action button to help people to take action on the racial justice issue and on inclusivity, so that people will be able to act from, like, let's say, corporate communications that are going out about what UM or IPG is doing to address that. Like, you can be able to take action within that. And again, like, that will be like taking you usually to the website to be able to take action. We're trying to expand that as much as possible. So this year we're really excited about possibly using QR codes in lots of different places. So we would love brands to like have it on their products, have it on their packaging, so that you could like take action related to that there. I personally have been like going to a lot of the protests. I was like, I'm going to print out loads of signs for people to use at the protest that's going to have a QR code that's going to be related to an action. So really, yeah, we're trying to make it as seamless as possible to be able to be used across all of the different channels. But sometimes it is best to have it housed like within content owned by the brand somewhere to act on.
Right. And then once the brand works with you to build it, do they have access to that button in perpetuity? Is licensing just forever?
Yeah, I mean, we try to be as relevant as possible, and like a lot of these things are related to things that are going on in like the current climate and the focus of the world in that moment. So clients will usually want to try and like keep updating them. But yes, once we've created them, like the client is able to use them across their properties. But we will, depending on like the budget and the scale, like we will usually try and incorporate some level of flexibility as well, so that we can like be very reactive to like new things that are happening, which I think has become very important this year.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of the QR codes and being able to add actionable items to actual physical product, because sometimes on social media it can feel like you're just shouting into the void, or like Twitch chat, it just kind of gets lost in the flow of everything. So being able to get out there across a different medium is definitely super impactful. How would a brand go about working with you to engage in that kind of behavior? Have you guys run a pilot on this, or is it a new offering that you guys are rolling out?
It's new, and we were talking to some of your clients about doing it. So we're very excited. Like the new things, we've got lots of new things this year. Our tech team and our product team has been very quick to like create actions that are relevant. So, for example, like when coronavirus hit, like we created a new like record video feature so that people could like send out messages of support to healthcare workers, for example, and things like that. We are like very much leading into the register to vote actions because we really want to get behind that at the moment. QR codes, we would love for someone to do it with us, and our team is very much available to like figure out it, but it is very easy in terms of like putting that QR code and it relating directly back to an action button. So whenever we're doing a campaign with someone, we will like be trying to think in that way, like what's something like it's totally new anyway, and for a lot of brands to be doing this kind of thing, but like is there something new we can bring to that brand, or like a new way that people can act, or like how can we make it specific to what that brand is trying to do? And then our team is like very available, and we are very much connected to your teams in terms of like helping clients to figure out how they can best use it and put it in all of their content and use their products really to the best of their capabilities to be able to help drive action.
QR codes, a hotly debated form of media the past, man, I don't know how long here in the U.S. It always goes back. I always see the benefit of them, and then I'm like, it's like, well, do people actually scan them? I don't know. And it seems to be changing with some updates from like the technology side. When look at Apple and they integrated QR scanning natively into like the actual camera itself. So it's interesting. I'm excited, but I like QR codes. I'm a believer in them.
Do your parents know how to use it with just their phone?
Yeah.
That's okay. That's like a pretty good barometer. That's how I usually test tech. It's like, do my mom and dad actually know how to use this?
Oh my goodness, do not ask me, because my mom still has like a Nokia from like 1997. It doesn't even have internet on it. Like, I think she doesn't want to be traced or something. I don't know what she's up to, but she's still
probably never working stuff. She's like that phone will survive for another decade, 2 decades.
Oh my God, it's still going strong, although she's like having to treat it like a child or something. She's like got it in a special pouch. I was just like, is she a secret drug dealer? Like, what is happening? I don't know why.
On her phone.
She probably keeps it right next to her pager on her hip, I assume.
Pagers is too much, yeah. It's just this beloved Nokia. She gets attached to things.
Oh, that's funny. And so the interesting thing, and maybe this is a great time to pivot into the question we have here in the chat. In case you're looking, I have the whole chat underneath my setup, which I'm pretty excited about. So if you see me looking down, I'm seeing all the good things that are coming in here. And so we got one question from a listener, a viewer. This is not a podcast. They want to know, for example, how do you deal with brands that want to be part of the current conversation and increase their activism, but are still in a corporate environment, maybe where there is structure and some issues kind of navigating like that corporate structure? That's the question. I don't know if we're equipped to handle this question, but
it's a pretty question. We're being confronted with a lot of big questions at the moment as a people.
Right. So do you two have any thoughts on that one before I give my thoughts on it?
So yes, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well. And it's been interesting talking to a lot of brands over the last few weeks, or a lot of friends who work at brands directly, and the good and the bad. But I feel like this has made like a lot of brands take a look at themselves and be like, are we doing the right thing? Like, are we addressing injustices and equality within our own organizations? And I feel like that's very much been something that everyone's been going back and being like, do we need to make organizational changes? So I think now is the right time to probably bring it up, because I think everyone is thinking about it. So definitely you have to be brave as a team to bring it up. But if you can find like an ally on your client team to be able to bring them the research and bring them the stats about people demanding it, and then that ally can maybe help you within that organization to be able to find the right people to try and make change. I think definitely like having someone who's on your side and who believes in it, you kind of, I feel like just having one conversation like that, and there are so many conversations going on at the moment, can lead to really big things. And I think if they can get to the right people within their organization, they can make pretty big changes for their employees and have conversations that maybe they weren't having before. And then that might be able to lead to them like doing good things through their media plan as well. So I think it's just like being brave, taking that first step, addressing like things that people probably feel a little bit uncomfortable addressing, but everyone is feeling a bit uncomfortable right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think the way I look at it is just from, experience of like, what do you as an individual have within your, resources to do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen a lot of different ways, like you mentioned, finding an ally in the company, raising the conversation, sending the email, just starting the conversation, because it's not going to change overnight. It's going to be a long conversation of how these things change, and that's just what it's going to be. But just starting to have that conversation, send an email, talking about it, because that's the initiative that you as a person can control within, I think, your organization most directly. And also, we've seen people on, Facebook, for example. There have been people that have been resigning. That is a form of, in a sense, like, protest and change and what they believe in. And it's like, at the end of the day, if the company that maybe that you don't, or that you work for, isn't aligned with your values, then you do have that option as a form of showing your support. And so that's something that we've been seeing across like LinkedIn and Twitter, and it's like with Facebook, for the stance that Mark Zuckerberg is taking on some of these issues. So
yeah, I heard that too, and I also heard there's like a campaign to remove like advertising budgets from there as well. But yeah, you're right. Like everyone can just take action in their own way, but like do what they think is right. And I always use this quote, and I can never remember who said it, but it was from an exhibit actually from the civil rights movement, and that said, if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Which I love to quote, and like I feel like, yeah, it's tricky, but it's like not half as hard as like what a lot of people have gone through and are going through, and it will get hopefully easier and easier as we keep on having those conversations.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you, chat, for that question. And if there are any others coming in, just feel free, and we'll take a look and insert them into the conversation. So one thing we haven't talked about yet that every brand loves to talk about in teams is programmatic. So do you guys work programmatically at all? How does that work? Or is it more like direct buys and indirect deals? Because I mean, like these action plans are custom, and they're a bit different than this like sort of like a 300 by 250. So how does that conversation work programmatically? Have you started that?
So yes, great question. So currently it's a direct buy with us, and we are contextually targeting and doing everything really like we'd be like a complement to your programmatic buy, like as a direct partner, like that's kind of like a deeper level of engagement and action within the plan. We have started conversations about like whether we could be tied into programmatic, and we also have been kind of realizing how great our contextual targeting is, and that if people don't want to actually use like the action button technology to make a stand, if they aren't feeling brave enough yet, could we tie into like those programmatic platforms to just like give people access to like really spot on contextual targeting? Because we know we're like very precise in terms of being able to get to the right kind of content. So that would probably be our first step to working with like a programmatic partner. So we're trying to do tests. We're looking to do tests with like some of our agency partners about like whether that would work, and just like having that very contextual alignment. But at the moment, I would say that we're very much like a complement to programmatic. Like programmatic was just kind of like that mass awareness, and like we are that kind of like deeper level of engagement, also getting the scale that kind of like a branded content element of the plan, but that's getting to lots of places. So because you're getting to every single moment really that someone's thinking about that issue related to that campaign.
Yeah, good to know. And what about lead times and turnaround times? So if a brand wanted to work with you, is it 24 hours? Is it a week? Is it 2 months? Like how much lead time do you need in order to get a campaign live? And the one thing we always like to say is that it's okay to put some extra padding in there. We've had some people come on, they're like, well, my tech team's not on this call, so I'm going to say 24 hours.
That's totally what I was about to say, and then be like, but yeah, I don't want to boast, but that is one of our strengths from our side, is that because we are in the business of trying to create action buttons and get them out there when something is topical and that's related to things people want to act on. We are very quick, like we're very nimble. So I would say it probably is reliant on the client and the setup at the client. Again, having come from I know that clients operate at different paces. There's different levels of rounds of feedback or people they need to get approval from. But from our side, we can get things out there the next day when we work with a client that like is smaller. For example, like we did something with Global Lyme Alliance, like spreading awareness about Lyme symptoms. And the Bieber, like this is when like Bieber having Lyme disease was breaking news back in like January. They wanted to get into that news like the next day. We were able to create action buttons and get everything approved within the day, get everything set up with tracking, literally get out. I think maybe it was 2 days. But they were able to like work that very quickly at their end. We'll put together like a timeline depending on how long clients need for approval and things like that. But we are doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of like the creative customization, in terms of like you giving us all of your tracking tags and us implementing those. So we can definitely work with a timeline for that, but we are very much built around trying to get things out there as quickly as possible. And then once a campaign is running, like we are very quick to change creative. We think it's not working or it's not sensitive to something that's going on. We'll come to your teams and be like, we're making this change and we can make it in the next hour kind of thing.
So you mentioned just kind of some of the things that a brand needs to supply to you. What is kind of told, you mentioned the tracking tags. What else do you need from the brand side in order to get a campaign up and running?
So we, as with anyone, like the more, a great brief is always good to work on, which isn't always available. But really like just like key messages that they want to include an action button, and they can direct us to like a site where they're talking about what they're doing if that's easier, and we can pull from that what the kind of actions that they want to drive, or are there any actions that are off limits that they don't want to be driving, so that our team can like create demos. We call them demos, like to be able to show clients how those look. We are very happy to do that for all of the teams there as well, because I know it can be hard to like picture when you've got all of these options in terms of actions people can take. So we can make a branded demo to show what that can look like. So really it's messages, logo, like images maybe that you might want to include within their videos. Sometimes like the final action can be like seeing what the brand is doing, or like some kind of initiative that they're taking towards that issue area. And then yes, like the tracking tags is pretty much it, apart from like approval. And we will also brand guidelines is one other thing. So like one of the other beauties of working with us is that like clients that might have been nervous about going into news content don't need to be. So for example, if you have a client that is nervous about being next to something about obesity, if it's like a high in sugar food client, our team is like using an algorithm to identify articles, but then is also like able to adhere to all of those like kind of brand guidelines to make sure that we're going into articles that are totally right in terms of tone, in terms of content, are brand safe. So they don't need to worry about that. But that's one other thing maybe that your teams or the client could work with us on, to be like, what kind of content is ideal for that brand.
Easy solution, it's very turnkey, I would say. There's really no like high production outside of us, in a sense, standing for something, getting the assets and putting it live, which is super easy. Or I don't want to say easy because nothing's easy. There's always more once you start doing something, but that initial hurdle of getting a campaign out there and setting it live and all that is probably on like the lower end of like the effort that is required to get it out there and make it successful, which is great. Especially, I would say now during a time when there are a lot of people that are looking for things like this solution to start doing something. So that's pretty exciting.
I was just waiting for you to finish your thought. I was just curious because we're talking about all these actions that people can take, obviously, through the action button. Do you guys have any kind of data around which are most successful in terms of driving engagement with the user? Is it, sending the video message or writing to your representatives or signing up to vote, or is it kind of just all depend on the cause? So
that's a great question. And the easier the action, the more engagement we're able to drive behind it. And so we'll often use like entry point actions, like to be able to draw people into that experience, like which would be like a sentiment poll, like say how you feel about this, or like answer this quiz, for example. Those kind of actions see engagement rates of like up to 15%. In terms of people who've seen it and people who've engaged with it, which is like very much unheard of from my advertising days and from like the days of seeing programmatic results of like 0.1%, for example. So like we're gearing everything towards that engagement, and a lot of the time we will use some of those entry level actions that people really appreciate. Like people want to be able to say like, I feel like this on this article. And when you see the sentiment poll, it also shows you like how everyone else has answered, so you can kind of feel like what's the sentiment that's out there at the moment, like how is everyone feeling, and that's being gathered for the client as well. So those are like the easiest entry point actions, and then like we'll be able to estimate if a client then wants to go on to do a deeper level of impact action. And it doesn't have to be. Some clients can just be like, I want to like give people a platform to say how they feel, and then I want to like direct them to some resources to learn more about that topic, or watch this video that's going to educate them some more, or give them like some information about what we're doing. But if we're going on to like the deeper levels of actions, like the email Congress petitions, pledges, record videos would be in that kind of next level of easiness to take part in, but slightly higher threshold. So those actions like will be more like in the kind of like 1% range. And then like obviously if you're asking someone to part with money by donating, or volunteering, like you're getting them to sign up to like commit some time, like I think they really appreciate that you're giving them the action, or like the registration to vote, like it's a timely process. So the engagement rates will be lower on those, but like we definitely are recommending that brands include as many of those as possible, because even if someone's not completing them, they're really going to appreciate the fact that they've been given that opportunity by that brand, like to do something that's really going to help them.
Yeah, providing access.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is important. Great. Well, I mean, on my end, I think you've answered every single one of the questions that I've had. And so I guess, is there anything that we should be asking you that we haven't already asked? Is there something about Speakable, the platform, the mission, new products? Is there anything that we haven't asked you yet that is, something that we should be talking about right
now? That's a great question. I mean, so from a new product perspective, as I say, like we are trying to look for like new ways for people to take action all the time. Like the record video came out. We also have like free text to be able to send messages of support to people. We're like creating action text for people to be able to act from text. So we're always trying to make it as easy as possible. I think like we touched on the QR code thing, and just like us trying to drive as much action out there. I guess probably my question to you guys would be like, how do we make it easier for our teams to work together and for us to get ideas in front of you? Because I do know quite a lot of the individuals on the teams from my IPG days, and pestering them from Orion. But
I guess plane and network this many ad hours.
Exactly. Please do not ask me any questions about that. I've had enough of them in my time, and I definitely still can't explain that to my mom. But so I guess it's just like, how do we coordinate between the teams? How do we get alerted to things that your clients are doing that might be relevant for us? Like, how do we create ideas for you to bring to clients? I'm hoping that like this being able to offer action buttons for like corporate communications, like will make people more aware of us, as well as being a good way for like employees to be able to take action and be able to know that they're doing something good towards the world as well.
So you're taking the first step. You're on the stream, you're talking with us. That's the way in. No, I mean, this is I would say step one, right? And you said the corporate communication angle, I think is great. I think that's something they should definitely be thinking about. But that's what Ryan and I do. We're the team that's out there looking, at our clients, their business challenges, and looking to match, solutions like yours directly to like the media teams and the clients themselves, and kind of bring those recommendations forward. So for us, this is the way. You're right on right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's perfect. I don't, Ryan, have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, like I said, this is kind of the first step, and just keep getting as many, applications and installations of those action buttons across publishers with our clients to show off to the rest of the clients in our portfolio. I know it always makes the conversations easier for us when we have something else to point to and be like, hey, brand X works with them and brand Y worked with them. So obviously the solution is worth investigating a little bit further. So having those brand examples to be able to drive back to, especially when they're in our network, is extremely helpful. But I had another question about kind of the future products and roadmap for Speakable. And I know this kind of goes against anti-COVID behavior, but in the future, as in a world where we're organizing more protests and walks and organized events, do you ever foresee these action buttons driving people to congregate in real life environments?
That's a great question, and I actually have spoken to some very cause-focused companies prior to coronavirus about doing that. So kind of using our volunteering feature to be able to try and tie you up to local events, because it is geolocated, or at least being able to give your email, basically say sign me up to be able to hear about something that's going on in my local area. But that is definitely it was one of our themes for this year, was to try and merge the offline and the online, and be if someone's going to a huge event or a concert, can we get a QR code up on the screen so that some celebrity can be I really want everyone to register to vote, look at the screens now, let's get everyone registered at this festival. Obviously coronavirus is making that tricky, but yeah, I think we definitely in the long term will be trying to do that as much as possible. It's just where are those moments of inspiration? And I feel there's such a sense of community at the moment, certainly where I live, and all of these protests and gatherings. So that's definitely one thing I was thinking today, is that I want to try and speak to the organizers of my local protests and be can we help in any way to be able to drive action around this? Because they've got this long list of laws that people should be contacting Congress about, and maybe we should just give them action buttons to be here's a way to take action right now, instead of having to read it out to us for 10 minutes. So definitely trying to bring that whole offline online community feeling, and yeah, that's a great question. That is something we're trying to do. Obviously coronavirus makes it a little bit weird for this year.
Right. I think there's only two places people are going outside right now to organize in their local communities, protests and walks, or the beach. Yeah. Because you wouldn't know that there was a global pandemic going on if you went and looked at any beaches. So maybe you guys should get a biplane and skywrite a QR code into the air to start taking social activism.
That won't be helpful towards climate change, Ryan. Yeah. And you remember I was on the eco committee. I was very militant about it. Ryan.
See, this is why you're in the position you are. You know all the different boxes to check to make sure everything goes off smoothly without affecting their cause negatively.
Although, having said that, I did do far too much traveling last year. So at least coronavirus has made me stop doing that and being a complete hypocrite.
Well, great. So as we start to round out our time here, there are always 4 questions that we like to end on. And this is kind of the recap segment. So for all of our listeners, it's kind of the final 4 questions, we call it, because these are the questions that we're always asked when we're talking to our brands and our media teams. So the 4 questions are, so again, what does it cost? What is the size? So again, what is your reach capability? What is the lead time? And then why you versus a competitor?
So I feel we touched on a lot of the top 3, but I'll give the headlines again if I can remember all the 4 questions. Right. So 50K entry point at a minimum, we do on viewable CPM for viewed action buttons. Typically that's around a $20 CPM. There's differing scales as budgets go up. And scale, we can definitely the bigger the ambition, the better for us. We can definitely reach that scale. We've done 10 million in a month before, related towards racial justice actually. So scale we can definitely achieve, and we'll be sizing that according to the budget, according to the goals of the campaign. Wow. The third one was speed, which I think, yes, we are very agile. We can set up processes to be able to move very quickly. We're customizing action buttons all the time. Our team is very quick to be able to make them and get them in front of your teams for approval. So it's just how quick can the client be able to get things approved at their end. And then the fourth one, like difference versus competitors. I think we really stand out. There are a couple of kind of semi-competitors, but there's no one, like we're like unprecedented in the industry. Like we have more actions than anyone. We have a better user experience than anyone. We have a better design. We're constantly getting that feedback from people who have said, have met with a competitor.
Yeah.
I love that. I wish we could screen share. We're still working on this capability, but yet like the design of the actual ad unit is fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely want to be like, if there's any way of sharing things afterwards, I can definitely share them to whatever this is. I couldn't even figure out how to type.
Do you know the link offhand where I could send people for case studies, or just send them to speakable.com?
I would say send them to actionbutton.org.
Okay.
And then just to like see action buttons, like we have an action button library on there, which will be like updated a lot with like the latest ones we have out there. And then I can definitely like send through case studies and things like that somehow. But yeah, I would say definitely in every way, like we, in terms of our capabilities, in terms of the experience, in terms of not having to click away anywhere to be able to take the action, the design, and then like the publisher network in terms of the scale we have. We have had like reports back from some of the Brave brands that like they had used some of our competitors and like there wasn't the scale, there wasn't a great user experience. So I think that's like where we did that.
Great.
Love it. So I know we only got a couple minutes left. I don't see any more questions popping off in chat. So while you're, home quarantined and limited to just going to your local rallies, what have you been doing to keep busy? Any good content recommendations? Any good recipes to share? Good books that we should be reading? What have you been up to?
So up until a few weeks ago, until I started going to the protests, I was mostly just trying to make a list of like, I felt really bad that I hadn't taken up any hobbies. I was mostly just making up a list of friends who have swimming pools that wouldn't mind having a New York visitor because I've been in this bloody apartment for so long. And I was very much like going on a Phoebe Waller-Bridge kick. So I was like watching Killing Eve, which I'd, to my shame, never seen before. Like she's got a new series called Run out on HBO. I've been like trying to get into a lot of playlists for when I'm not on work calls during the day to have in the background. At the moment, that's all like Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, Nina Simone, Gary Clark Jr.
Very diverse.
It's like fitting. And then obviously like the last few weeks going to loads of protests, which have been super, super inspiring and getting kind of bigger and bigger every day. And I just really hope the momentum keeps going with that. And I feel like this kind of moment has given everyone like a chance to think about like what they want to change and has really built like that sense of community. So I've been doing a lot of that. My sister actually sent me a load of and if I can ever figure out how to share with this group, she sent me a load of educational resources, which includes like shows to watch and like documentaries to watch. So I watched a Martin Luther King documentary last week. And actually, finally, a shameless plug for her, she actually has a show on Cartoon Network, which features a character that's based on me and my mom. It's called Summer Camp Island, and it's just been released on HBO Max. And she does one of the voices. She writes it. She came up with the idea for it. Like, it's very like, it's great being her sister and feeling like a real underachiever. But she also has a character in it that's like partly based on me, partly based on my mom. It's a witch who people, and it's done by her voice, so it kind of feels like I'm in it. And I'll constantly be like, this doesn't seem like me at all. And then one of my friends will be like, you literally said that this morning. So I'll be like, but it's coming out on HBO Max, and I'll definitely be trying to like tune into that. Like also just been trying to like read some books, but definitely have not been getting into the cooking, embroidery, harp playing.
One thing at a time.
We're more like trying to figure out where the pools are and where the protests are.
Yeah. Well, with that, I know we're just about at time. So again, as always, everyone in chat, thanks for hanging out. Alice, thank you so much for being here and being our featured guest this week.
Thanks, you guys.
And Scott,
I really enjoyed my time. This has been a nice Friday chat.
I'm quite glad.
Weekend.
Yeah.
You too.
Take it easy, everybody.